At any rate, I was asked to come down here and it's an honor to be here helping my friends here at the Black Hills Institute celebrate 50 awesome years of saving dinosaurs from the second extinction. Well done. So I don't know what half of you have as well as I would like, and I'd like less than half of you have as well as you deserve. I'm sure most of you guys recognize that from home. It's one of my favorite shows. But at any rate, it was suggested to me that some of you would like to hear the story from my perspective of finding the not one, but the two dueling dinosaurs. I'd like to pause here for a moment and remember those that are no longer with us that had a part in the story. Two of my heroes, Clayton Phipps and the landowner Murray, and also Patrick Duffy. These larger-than-life individuals, without his cooperation, this story would not have been possible. It began as you might expect, on a pleasant day in June. Mark Eatman, Chad O'Connor, and myself went out at daylight and decided we'd try our luck at finding a dinosaur. A quick bit of background on my cousin Chad. Chad was born with cerebral palsy and had asked several times if he could tag along. Because of his disability and physical limitations, I was hesitant to take him along. As some of you may know, fossils require delicate handling. As it turned out, I couldn't have been more wrong. Chad was an awesome part of this discovery. It was Chad's first day ever looking for dinosaurs. I said, yeah, I'll be in Chad, we're going to take a look around. Mark and I had about 13 years of experience between the two of us prospecting for dinosaurs at that point. I parked the pickup at the bottom of a canyon in some likely-looking badlands, and we each set off in different directions. I ran into Mark about 11 a.m. that morning, a mile or two from the pickup, and we sat down and had a sandwich. I asked him if he'd found anything, and he said, yeah, I did. He pointed off in the distance, and he said, yeah, just over that hill there, I found a pelvis coming out of the ground. And so, let's see where. But he said, there is one thing that's kind of cool about it. He said that there's a femur sticking out, it looks to be articulated in the pelvis. So I thought, that might be worth checking out. So we parted ways and kept looking, and I decided on the way back quick if I'd go by that site and see if I could find it. And sure enough, I walked down the canyon, usually bone chips at Margaret's, led me up to the pelvis, and the femur was articulated. And I took a couple pictures that day, and as I dropped back down into the canyon about 30 feet to the bottom, I see Chad's tracks. And so Chad had been within 30 feet of finding them that day too, which was pretty cool. But at any rate, we met back up at the pickup, and that evening when we parted ways, we really didn't have any big plans to dig it. It's like a pelvis in the bottom of a canyon, and we had to build a road down in there to get to it and drag it out. And, years of experience with Mark and I, we knew that not every site pans out, and I spent lots of money on sites that I should never open. And so we decided, well, Mark and I just kind of decided, well, if we ever go back and decide to dig on that, we might someday do it. The Chad was just totally freaked out. We found a dinosaur, we got to dig it. And he literally is the reason I went back to that site. If without him being there that day, we maybe never would have went back. And so I called the landowners, told them what we found, and we made plans. I actually had to cut my hay, and it took about a month to get that done, and bale and get the feed put up for the winter for my cattle. And we met back with them about a month after the initial discovery day, and that day we realized that this pelvis was actually what was shown, and from this side. This is a little sculpture that my friends Chris and Katie made, and I'll try to go back to my original speech. I was going to go off track. But anyway, so the femur, we can see that right here, and we can see the pelvis, but we really couldn't see anything else that was covered with this. The hill kind of coming out like this, and then a little bit like this. There was some grass and roots and sagebrush growing through here. Anyway, we knew there was a pelvis, and I didn't even know that day what direction it was going. So when we went back to the Murray's, we actually started brushing a little bit of the dirt away. I could see the row of the processes on the vertebrae in a line going this way, and then over this way a little farther I found some bits of Triceratops frill, or ceratopsian frill, weathering down in the canyon. So then I visited with Lige, Murray, the landowner, and we made an agreement to allow us to go see if there was more there. And anyway, I better check my stats or something. Oh, okay. Mark could only be here on weekends. His wife told him he needed to get a real job to feed his kids. Understandably so. As my wife's friend Peter Larson once said, there's a lot of ups and downs in this business. So Chad and I spent most of the rest of the summer seeing just what was in the hill. The site was just awesome as each bone was in its place as they would have been in life. making progress at that site much quicker than the usual dinosaur site. If you spent much time in the Hellkirk or the Lance Formation, you know how rare this actually happens to have an articulated skeleton. So about 2 weeks into the dig, I had a perimeter around the herbivore. This guy pretty well had him all exposed, and it just followed bone. You know, it was just so simple to follow the bones down and just see exactly where it was laying and how it was positioned. And we'd come around this side. We couldn't use the machine on this side because there was a huge wall there. So Chad and I jackhammered through all this. He was fairly mobile at the time. He's now in a wheelchair, but he would usually get on his knees and shovel, and I would jackhammer. He'd just kind of keep it cleaned out so we could see where we were doing and make sure we weren't hitting something with a jackhammer. And so we cleaned this whole area out by hand, and I don't know, we took it down from here, probably 6 or 8 feet, a big tunnel all the way around here, and got a perimeter on this side. So I was actually, we could park the backhoe right here, and I'd borrowed my Uncle Clayton's backhoe. That's his part of the story. And anyway, I'm digging, and I'm reaching over the hill each time, and about the 753rd time I dumped a load of sand, I started to dump my bucket, and I'd been watching every time, make sure it wasn't, you know, we knew where everything was, but we hadn't found the front legs actually of this guy yet. So, and sometimes they can be scattered. It just depends on what happened to the dinosaur after it died. And so I was being fairly careful and trying to watch. And I go to dump my bucket, and there's bone chips in it. And I'm like, oh shoot, what they hit, you know? So I jump out and I start brushing the dust away in the bucket, and this hand claw starts to appear. So what I've done is I scraped right across here and flipped one of these hand claws, and actually I hit the foot just a little bit too. And so here's this hand claw to a carnivorous dinosaur. We already had this guy laid there, and my mind just went. I couldn't even really comprehend. You know, it wasn't computing. I'm like, what's going on? So I jump down in the quarry and I start brushing the sand away there by taking the scoop out, and I see this arm and this leg start to appear. I just totally, my hat went there about 100 feet, and I just had to kind of take a moment to take it all in, and a million thoughts are going through my head. You know, what's this carnivore doing here? All of a sudden, you know, this guy actually, there were roots growing through the plant eater, and so they, you know, they kind of got into the rib cage, and actually about a third of the skull was already eroded away. And that's what I was talking about, the second extinction. If you don't collect a dinosaur, it's gone forever by Mother Nature. It claims them back. So I like to say we save them from the second extinction, natural erosion. But anyway, yeah, there you go. So I guess back to the story. My hat went here, and I was just, one of my first thoughts was, this dinosaur is going to be spectacular. You know, the roots and stuff and the little erosion has got to that one. This one's 20 feet back on the hill. If it's halfway there, it's going to be spectacular. And I mean, I couldn't have dreamed this up. And obviously, they weren't friends. You know, what are they doing together? It's it really wasn't competing. And so anyway. And and as I was digging, this is about the color of the fossils, and this is about the color of the sand, so you could really tell the difference, you know. So I was fairly safe, confident with my bucket, you know. You're not supposed to, you don't want to find a dinosaur with a back. You know, but I lucked out and did, and I didn't hurt it too bad. And that's just a story. I mean, I didn't have 30 college students volunteering their time to help me dig. It's me and Chad. So anyway, all right, where am I at here? So that evening I called the Murrays and Mark and told them that things had picked up a bit. Within a couple more weeks, we'd exposed the skeleton of the carnivore that was entwined with the herbivore, and I'd yet to see the skull on this thing. I pretty much, you know, come around here, but I hadn't exposed any more than just this ridge right here, and this was still covered with sand, and I hadn't exposed enough on this neck here to actually tell which way these vertebrae were even going. I was just following the bone. And another crazy thing about this discovery is there's skin around both dinosaurs. They're preserved that well. And in the field, I didn't even realize that. I just knew there was an orange halo around both skeletons. And I knew I would hit bone as soon as I saw that halo. There was going to be bone in there. I've never computed. Because in 2006, dinosaur skin was kind of a non-existent thing. Since then, it's really become, well, a lot more common. Any articulated dinosaur we find now almost always has some skin. So we're keying in on finding it and seeing it, and we're seeing a lot more of it than it was ever. It really wasn't that prevalent back then. So anyway, I went through a lot of skin, finding it. But anyway, so I followed this halo down and followed these bones down, and I'm just sitting there thinking, dang, the skull's just missing. Where in the heck the skull? They backhoed out, did something drag it off before they got buried, and so I actually was just sitting there contemplating one day. You know, I kind of got to the end of it. I'm like, dang it, and I'm thinking, and then it just clicked. Oh, that skull's upside down. See, I thought this was the ilium of the top of this pelvis ridge. Well, it was the skull was upside down. That's why I didn't recognize it. It was this ridge right here looks very similar to the William on a carnivore. So I jumped up and I ran around. I got my pocket knife out and I started digging, and sure enough, there's teeth that start to appear. So this is the skull to the nano, a direct cast of it, and it's tipped upside down once. So it's in the ground like that, and so I could see this ridge, and so as I started to just clean down that thing, here's a tooth. My hat went in the air that day too. I was so thankful it was there. So anyway, it took all the strain I had not to field prep that skull. I just had to quit, put my pocket knife back in my pocket, and walk to a different part of the quarry. So at that point, I contacted my friends Chris Morrow and Katie Bush and asked them if they'd like to come see the world-class dinosaur site. I didn't tell Chris what I'd found, but Chris trusted my judgment enough to come check it out. And the reason I contacted Chris, because he was one of the few folks I'd run into at that point with formal training in paleontology that was actually willing to get down on my cowboy level and share his knowledge. And so when Chris arrived at the site and walked over the hill, basically you drove into the site, and we could drive up to the top of the ridge, and you walked over a hill like this coming down. And so as we walked down the hill, we could see this big foot. And somewhere here, I have it. There it is. So this is a picture of my daughter Julie at 8 years old, and that's that foot. So you can see how big it actually was. And yeah, you can pass that around. Right? Yeah, this is like 1/22nd scale. Yeah, my friend Katie actually sculpted this, reconstruction. So anyway, as you walk down over the hill, you can see this foot. It just caught your eye. I mean, I actually had a big blue tarp put over the theropod, and just had it covered, protected from the weather. And actually, I'd hoped Chris wouldn't notice it. And so you walk over the hill and you see this big foot, and you kind of walk down through. We had a path kind of built down through here. And he walks up, and you can see the tail, and the tarp's covering the entire theropod. But you can see this ceratopsian tail, and so Chris just walked all the way. And ceratopsians was his big deal in school. He really studied ceratopsians, so he was just totally geeking out. And he walks to the end of the skull, and I just remember him looking up and says, "Clayton, this is you're right. This is just world class. You know, here's a completely articulated dinosaur from the hell creek. That never happens." And I said, "Chris, I got something else to show you." so we walked on through here, and I pointed at this tail. I said, "Chris, what do you think that is?" And he said, "Well, I don't know." So then I pulled the tarp off. He actually had to sit down. He just was blown away. And yeah, we couldn't have made this up. It was a fairy tale story. But anyway, with some tips from Chris and some other friends and a bit of cowboy logic, I think Peter actually gave us some tips on some of the bigger jackets and how to. This is my first big project in the field of actually taking a skeleton out of the ground. And so with a little help from friends and a bit of cowboy logic and ingenuity, we finished the task of exposing more to start the process of trying to decide where we're going to take them out. I tried to come up with a plan where I could put telephone poles underneath the whole thing and take it out in one block, but it wouldn't fit on a semi. It was in a remote canyon. It was just too risky. I couldn't risk doing that. And so I decided we've got to find a way to separate them. And Chris had done a few big projects. Not this big, but he had done a few bigger projects with jackets. And so with his help, and we decided where we were going to make the splits. We took this skull off in one piece. The rib cage and the neck was in one block. The pelvis and I think the femurs were in the one block. The tail was one block. This foot here was one block. The carnivore tail was one block, and the theropod's body was one big block. I think that one was, I can't remember, people would probably be able to tell us. We weighed these blocks when we moved them later, but I think this one was around 12,000 pounds when we pulled it out of the field. So anyway, it was a long nut summer, and I don't think I've ever worked that hard before or since. I lost 15 pounds digging these dinosaurs out. When the time was right, I asked Lige, the landowner, if he would be willing to bring his tractor up and help us load the jackets. And once we got them loaded, I commented on Lige's new, to him, front wheel assist tractor. And back then, a front wheel assist tractor was a pretty cool thing to have if you were a rancher, because you could actually get to your cows and feed them, because it had front wheels pulling too. And all I still have is a single back wheel tractor. But anyway, I remember him saying, I commented, "Man, that's a pretty nice tractor." And I remember him saying, "Yeah, and if we can realize something from these fossils, that tractor's going to have some friends around here." So anyway, The dinosaur spent the winter in Elijah Marianne's shed while Chris and I worked out him being able to purchase property near Fort Peck, Montana for a dinosaur preparation lab. We moved the fossils to Fort Peck spring of 2007. CK Preparations, Chris and Katie, began the initial preparation of the jackets. Chris also began marketing the dinosaurs and trying to get the word out about our discovery. This proved to be not as easy as we'd expected. The lead paleontologist in Montana at the time had refused to acknowledge our discovery, even though it had made front page news in the Newstown News Argus, a pretty big Montana newspaper, and it had gone out briefly on the AP Wire. The recession in 2008 didn't help us any either. My mutual friend Jared Hudson had introduced me to Peter Larson sometime before this, and I invited him up to see the dude. Shortly thereafter, we contracted with BHI to help us find a home for him. In 2012, Peter and Dr. Robert Bacher came up and visited them, and there's a YouTube video Chris posted with Dr. Bob that day talking about them. Let's see. Oh, I remember real distinctly the day that Dr. Bob saw him, and he was so excited because he actually described Nanotyrannus as its own species back in, I think, 1988. And it's been hotly disputed, and still is being disputed to this day, whether or not it's a juvenile T-Rex or its own species. I've been in the nano camps for as long as I can remember, just from based on the shed teeth that I found. I found baby tyrannosaur teeth that don't match, and not even close to a T-Rex or to a nanotyrannus tooth. The nano teeth are very blade-shaped. The Rex teeth are banana-shaped. And just based on the teeth, I was quite sure that this was probably, had to be a different species. But anyway, Dr. Bob was the one that described it. So when he saw it, he actually had tears in his eyes when he saw this, because he knew this was going to be enough to settle the debate. When this gets studied, it will settle the debate. And as he's walking around it, I remember, where's that arm? So this is so that's a cast of the original, off the original arm that Chris did. And I remember, Dr. Bob's a cool guy. So he starts going like this, and he's looking at that arm, and he says, "This thing can throw a baseball." That's one of the cool comments I remember. So as time went on, and we really were struggling to figure out what to do, and try to get these to a museum. That's really what I wanted. In 2013, Tom Lindgren, Bonham's auction house representative, contacted me and asked if we'd be interested in trying an auction. 7 years since the discovery, and having had the dealers and the money was flowing the wrong direction for that whole time on the project, I was pretty much broken out of options. I wasn't thrilled about it because we lose control over where they might end up. I dearly wanted to see them go to a museum so everybody could appreciate them. But I've been beating the dead horse for a long time, about 7 years, hoping for a happy ending. So I approached our group with the auction idea, and we decided to give it a try. Peter brought his crew up and helped us secure the jackets for transport to New York City. So November 19th, 2013 was a big day. As the hammer fell, it was a pretty hard pill to swallow that there were no takers. I just sunk what little reserve I had into getting the dueling dinosaurs from New York City. There's a lot of terra firma and some puzzles in it to move to New York City. And now what? So to make matters worse, after all the publicity from the auction, Jerry and Bo Severson, the fellows that owned the mineral rights under the land, and they also had sold the surface rights to the property where we found these dinosaurs to the Elijah Marianne Murray the year before we found them. So in 2005, they signed the deed saying the Murrays owned it. In 2006, we found these dinosaurs. So it was seller's remorse, and I understand them being upset that all of a sudden these dinosaurs were possibly worth what they got for the ranch. But they still retained mineral rights in the deed. So they thought, these are valuable. We're going to come after them as a mineral. No one had ever asked the question before. And as you know, I'm not mad at the justice system. It's still the best one in the world. It's not for little guy though. We're fighting glad. These folks had 9 lawyers start 1. And so it was a long drawn out deal, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But so that happened the day before the auction actually was going to happen. They came out with their claim against us. So all of a sudden we had to scramble and try to get an escrow set up if they did sell, to put the money in until we sorted it out. Nobody did ever ask the question. They had the right to ask the question, although a 5th grader, I think, could answer the question. It took a long time, a lot of money in our courts to figure that out. So anyway, that's kind of a brief history on how this came about. So, we quickly had to agree on the escrow, and that's where Pat Duffy comes in. Pat was Peter's friend and attorney through his ordeal, as some of you probably know. So Peter contacted Pat and asked him, what he thought, and he suggested we file a declaratory judgment action to prove ownership. So the Murrays did that. My name wasn't on the lawsuit. The Murrays were fighting the Seversons, But I was actually helping them. We were all staying together and trying to put our share of what we expected to get into the lawsuit to help everybody be able to keep going. And so in the meantime, rather than ship the 13-ton of rock and fossil back across the country when the auction failed, which was quite expensive, we opted to pay storage in New York City for 3 years while we sorted everything out. That wasn't cheap either. The storage in New York is not cheap on big blocks like this. But anyway, I'll be forever grateful that we had such an excellent group of people on our side and stuck together through what turned into a very expensive and drawn-out legal nightmare. When I went into the attorney's office to be deposed, I guess, for this thing, I said, I'm 40 years old and I've never needed an attorney. I tried to live my life as a decent human being and avoid you guys. And he kind of chuckled. And I got thinking about it later, they deal with the worst people on the planet, or the worst in people. Maybe not the worst people, the worst in people on a daily basis. People that want to argue and fight. I'm not that guy. So anyway, we won the first round at the Montana Federal Court. The decision was appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of California, where that court reversed the Montana decision in favor of the Seversons in a 2-1 vote. That was pretty hard to swallow. The decision turned Bailey Collie Jones' head. No one had ever negotiated fossil rights. If you went out prospecting, you asked the landowner. You never considered the mineral holders ever. It hadn't been done. In 1918, I think Earl Douglas tried to file minerals on Dinosaur National Park in Utah. And it wasn't an actual court case. A panel just decided, we're going to call it a surface right. And so everybody kind of relied on that ruling. It was more, I don't know if you can call it, more of a hearing, but at any rate, everybody kind of relied on that from that point on. It's a surface right. So we hadn't really done anything wrong. It just kind of blindsided us, but here we are dealing with it. So, So anyway, after the Ninth Circuit ruled against us, it kind of turned fossil ownership. A lot of the fossils, there's a lot of land in the western United States, well, all the United States, and not always is the owner the same as the mineral right. The minerals have been severed on a good part of it. I don't own any of the minerals on the land that I own. And so anyway, here we are. So the Murrays then filed an en banc asking the Ninth Circuit to take for a bigger panel of judges to look at it. Less than 1% of those were ever granted. And ours was granted thanks to support. All of a sudden we had friends we didn't even know about. Even the SVP was on our side. Unbelievable, but it was. And so they wrote letters and everybody kind of came together and petitioned the Ninth Circuit that maybe they ought to reconsider. Because, even fossils in museums were possibly under new ownership if all of a sudden they're a mineral, that nobody had paperwork on the fossils for a mineral holder, from a mineral holder. So it was a rather trying time. Because like I say, Mark and I have been doing it 13 years together, off and on, and so I had about 7 years into it, and I'm thinking, well, shoot, there goes what I love doing. If this turns south, what am I going to do now? And go back being a cowboy, I guess. But anyway, our en banc was granted because of all the support we suddenly had. And Peter Larson is just a superstar in helping with all the legwork in the case. A few years into the lawsuit, North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences contacted Peter inquiring about the Doolers. So, February 2016, Peter and I flew to New York and met the team from the museum and began negotiations, all pending the outcome of the fossil mineral case, of course. We were, however, able to move the Doolers to the museum in Raleigh. This was mutually beneficial because it would help the museum in their fundraising. They could take people and say, hey, this is what we're trying to acquire. And also, for our part, it was great because it stopped the bleeding on the storage in New York City. Some more time passed, and in February of 2019, my son Luke and I, and most of the rest of our group, testified at the Montana legislature hearing on House Bill 229. So there was a lady that takes families out in Montana. Shanna Bice is her name. She's out of Glendive, and she came up with the idea. Her and Marianne, the landowner that I was dealing with, were actually friends. And so she suggested to Marianne that, hey, why don't we try the legislature and try to get a bill, a law passed in Montana clarifying this. And hey, that's a good idea. And so we're in the middle of a lawsuit, but we could do that. So we all went and testified. And Luke was 12, I think, 10? I don't know. I'd have to do that. But anyway, it was pretty cool watching him testify at the House and Senate, a young kid. And it kind of got their attention, and I think it helped us. His mother helped him write a really good paper on it, too. But at any rate, so that was a new thing for me. I got to see how bills are passed and laws are made in our country. And that was cool, too. I'd rather not have done it. So anyway, Tuesday, April 16th of 2019, the governor of Montana signed it into law. So House Bill 229 clarifies fossils belong to the surface owner, not the mineral owner. And now if it's ever challenged again, they'll go look at our case and it's settled forever. So we're just lucky we've got to pay for it. So anyway, because the Murray Severson's case was ongoing during the legislative process, the Montana law didn't take effect for us immediately. Due to all the letters of support we received at the Ninth Circuit, they quietly decided to send our case back to the Montana Supreme Court. And because we now had law on the books, the lawsuit finally ended in May of 2020. So in the following years, the museum in Raleigh has been successful in their continuing fundraising efforts. They have since designed and built a new wing of at the museum for preparation and exhibit space for our discovery. The dueling dinosaurs, I'm happy to report, did find a home in the museum and will be making their debut at the grand opening April 27th of 2024. Is that everyone?
Thank you. I guess I'm open for questions too.
Do any of you have questions that don't regard the incident at Isla Sorna? Funny, right? Some of you got it. Anyway, yeah. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
So how many feet? What's the dimensions of that site?
Ooh, good question. I think it was about, if I remember right, this guy was about 28 feet long, and this guy was 22 feet long. I don't recall from here to there. Yeah, but it was definitely over 30 feet, probably. And so, yeah, to try to fit it on a semi, and I really didn't want to take, one other thing that made me happy, when Dr. Bob saw it, one of the things I remember that day when he came up and saw it, he said, you guys did a good job of getting these out. He said, there's few academic crews that I know that could have done what you guys did. And I was proud of that. But, yeah, he's cool. Any others? Go ahead.
When you passed around the forearm, looked like it was approximately the same size as hands over here.
It's actually a tiny bit bigger.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
But
half the size of
the
the
animal would have been just a fraction of that size.
Yeah, what is the fraction size difference? You know, I mean, are we talking half the sheer weight?
Well, how long is Stan? About 40 feet, roughly. And this one was, I think, 22 feet. So yeah, about half the size. Yep. And there's just different things on it that really make it look like it's most likely an adult. I mean, the nasal's fused. On a T-Rex, they're not fused. Peter pointed out a ton of differences. There's actually more teeth in an animal's jaw, more tooth sockets than there is in a T-Rex. There, at least most of them have been found. There's a horde of reasons why it's most likely it's on a critter.
I tried to count the teeth too, but I couldn't do it that fast. But it does have more teeth, doesn't it, than here?
Yep, and Peter's way more advanced in the study of tyrannosaurs than I am. But I think there's 13 in a T-Rex maxilla, if I'm right. Count. I don't know. Yeah, count them, Andre.
Yeah, 13.
And I think there's about 15 sockets here. So that I don't know. Arms don't shrink as you grow. Come on. We can stop there. Cowboy logic. But I'm not a scientist. Don't get me wrong. They're still studying it. I can't wait to see what the scientists at North Carolina finally decide what they're going to do, what they're going to call it. Yeah. And it is a big issue. I mean, there's one guy that's based his life's work on it, and it seems no matter how many good ones we find, he's not going to quit. But we'll see how the scientists at North Carolina, what their conclusions are. I'm excited to find out. Go ahead.
So before or after this published, most exciting this?
The one that got me started was a Stygimoloch skull. In 2003, I went out on my wife's birthday, which she's still probably mad about. but anyway, I took a group of people out and we went prospecting, and I found a little Stygimoloch skull. And I don't know if you know what that looks like. Pete probably has a cast on it. Or actually, do you guys have any original fossils? Okay. There's only like 3 partial skulls in existence. The one I found was the most complete one to date, I think, found, and so that one kind of gave me a jump start. It gave me about a year's wages to see if I could actually make a living doing this. And my wife wasn't very happy when I quit my job as a cowboy to go be a dinosaur hunter either. But it worked out. It only took 30 years. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
It was rumored that a small tornado hit you the day that you found this big Moloch skull.
Oh, that was a wild evening, yes. We were working like badgers. That little skull was smaller than this skull, so we took it out in a jacket just about the size of this, I suppose. I think it's like 22 inches long. But Mark Eaton was helping me, and lightning's coming in the distance, and there's a huge storm rolling in. And, we just want to protect that little skull because it's so cool. And so we're frantically getting it done. And yeah, a mini tornado did try to take us and the dinosaur away. Yeah. But we got it out of the hills, and the guy that prepared that, it was actually Barry James, who prepared that skull for me. And he told me, he said one more rainstorm would have really significantly damaged that skull, because he said there was actually a cavity when he flipped it over and opened the jacket. Under the pallet, there was a sinkhole that already started to form, and he wrote, he said one more rain, that most of the rest of that pallet and front skull had just, gone to oblivion, so he'd had a heck of a lot worse time trying to put it together. So yeah, there's a short window of time to collect a fossil before it goes back to nothing. And every site's different, depending on how much overburden's on them, depending on how well preserved they are. Some fossils you can find on the surface like a claw. I picked up claws that are absolutely hard as rock and perfect, just out prospecting. But most of them have already had some kind of deterioration from the freeze-thaw cycle in Montana and South Dakota and Wyoming, where the formation is.
How much was you exposed when you first got there?
So just about that much. Just about that much. And Mark was walking down the canyon. There's a big canyon right down here, and he found what we call the bone chips, the bone trail. He found some bone chips in the bottom of the canyon, and he tried to find the source. So we walk along prospecting, you see a little chunk, and you're like, oh, geez, where'd that come from? Sometimes you can find the source. Most of the times, it's already too late, you can't. What you get is a couple little fragments. But anyway, he was able to follow these bone chips up the wall and found this pelvis coming out. And he did a little bit of poking around that day. I could see when I walked down there, I could see where he'd exposed the head of the femur. So we had hope, but we really didn't know which end of the dinosaur might still be preserved, or if it was just a pelvis and a femur. Most of the time, the Hell Creek stuff is, if you get half a bone, you're pretty happy. Literally, because the other half's already eroded out before it exposed. And they're scattered. I think Stan was, a football field size? The bones were scattered out across. Somebody from VHI helped me out here. That's the story I remember. Stan was like a football field discovery area to get what they got. So usually they're disarticulated and scavengers are packed up here and there. One other cool thing about this site is you can see the teeth. I've speculated, and I can't wait. Hopefully they'll get a good answer. But you can see a lot of teeth are missing in that guy. I think we found 16 or 21, I don't remember the exact number, of teeth scattered in and around this guy as I was excavating. And I didn't expose it that much, just enough to get him out. We didn't do any field prep really at all, except for my little bit on the skull. but there was one tooth embedded right in the flesh, right here on this dinosaur. There were, I think, 6 or 7 teeth embedded in its neck. One of which is still embedded in the neck. We didn't take out, and we didn't take this tooth out either. As you're digging through the sand, just trying to get down to it, sometimes one will roll out, so it's not in place anymore. And I remember like 7 being in the neck, 1 up here. There were a handful right here between that big foot and this skull. There was just, and back then I didn't even do mapping. So I didn't map the site. Chris came out. He was the reason. That was the reason I called Chris. I wanted him to map it. But he wasn't there the evening. I dug up this little. I just was exposing things again, or trying to get perimeter around here so I get them out. I dug up a handful of teeth right here. And so my theory is this guy's. I think there may have been a pack of these guys probably killed this guy. I'm not sure. This is just my speculation. But anyway, when I saw that big patch of teeth in there, and here this guy looks to be stepping on this Nanotyrannus tail, well, I'm sure that made him angry, so he turned around and snapped at him, and maybe he bit this leg, and then that instinctively, he kicked him in the head, because the skull's a little crushed, whether that's from, the natural earth process of crushing it as they became fossilized, I don't know. Or maybe the sand that fell down on him and buried him, because something that buried him very quickly to be preserved this nicely. I'm not sure what happened, but at any rate, the skull's caved in, and this big foot and everything, it just lines up, and all those teeth right there made me think maybe he kicked him in the head, and that, probably slammed him into a wall of sand. Maybe they got buried instantly, because nothing's really packed off. We're not positive the front legs are here to this guy, and I'm sure Triceratops wings were pretty tasty, like buffalo wings, I don't know. But so we're not sure, but they may be in that jacket. If they are, they're tucked up, real tight against the chest. We didn't expose enough to know. We do see the coracoid and scapula, so there's hope that the front legs are there. Not sure. But yeah, anyway, I think maybe that's what happened in the end. I don't know. I hope they can figure all that out. Because we took them to the museum as basically a Christmas present waiting to be unwrapped. That's Mark Eaton's words. They're good. Because that's really right. There's just a ton of science in those jackets to find out And I'm so excited that they're going to finally start working on it in the spring. Yeah. Anybody else? That's probably the word you know. Go ahead.
I mean, there's a possibility you could actually see scratches on the bone from the bites, right? Has anything been discovered on that?
Not to my knowledge, we didn't notice that. We definitely see teeth embedded in the flesh where flesh would have been, inside that halo on that guy. So something chewed on him, whether it was after he died, I can't even be sure of that. I like to think it was probably during whatever happened that these two came to be preserved together. I don't know. But maybe they washed in that way, but that was one guy's theory when he first saw him. He's like, oh, they just washed in that way. I don't think so, because I don't think all those little teeth would have stayed with the two skeletons as they washed down the creek. That don't make any sense at all. I don't believe it was a flood event that placed the two together like that. But that's just my cowboy logic. So I could be wrong.
So what's going to be displayed
I am excited to go see. I don't really know. I did actually have a conversation with, well, I probably should, I'll let them share. I'll let them share what I know. I don't want to say much. But I do know they're building a big wing, or they just finished building the wing around them. There is enough money with this specimen to build a brand new wing, and it's going to be glass, I think. And actually, I think you're going to be able to go in and walk and talk and talk to the preparators and the scientists as they work. It's really a public, friendly display, I think, which I'm happy about too. And yeah, I know a little more than that, but I'll let them tell you. I don't know a lot more. Because they're theirs now. They'll do what they want. But so far, I'm really happy with what they've been doing. Good.
So like you said, when you first made the discovery that you had to go pay for like everything, so like every day and night you just like put away from this.
No, I really didn't. No, I wasn't even. It wasn't really on the radar because we had a pelvis in the bottom of a canyon that may not turn into anything. We knew nothing then. And that's another thing I like to tell people about it that haven't really done this. Just because you found a dinosaur doesn't mean you found a cool dinosaur that's going to turn out. Most of the time, like I said, it's fragments and the source just ends. I was working on a Triceratops site that I found one time, and I dozed for 5 hours getting over with the layout and the skid steer, and while I was doing that, Luke walked around the corner and found a really good one. My site had 2 more little pieces of frill, and that was it. It ended. And so I wasted a lot of money and time on that site, and Luke's was an all-summer job, So you just never know till you're done digging. And sometimes, even when you're done in the lab, my brother Jason found a torosaur, and he took me to the site, and I looked at it, and I walked away from that site for a year. Because I literally found 9 skeletal skull sites to ceratopsians in one day on my motorcycle. They're everywhere, but they were all blown apart and not really worth collecting. So this site Jason found, the same thing. There were some frill pieces laying there, and they weren't kind of blown up beyond collection. To really repair it and make it look nice again, it was going to be tough. And so I said, Jason, I don't know about this site. So I walked away from here. He started doing family tours on his place, taking people out. And the first tour he took them up to that site, and he started exposing it, and pretty quickly exposed a real vertebrae. He hasn't done this as much as I have, and he was over his head. So he called me, and I said, sure, I'll come take another look. And it turned out to be one of the best torosaurs ever discovered. We didn't realize that until we took it to CK Preparations. They flipped the jackets over and cleaned them down in the lab. That's when we realized we had about a third of the skull of this torosaur, which is a lot rarer than most ceratopsians. It's a rare species of ceratopsian. And it was a chia pet. If I would have tried to prep it, I'd destroyed the whole thing because the roots had grown through almost everything. It was just a nightmare to prep, but it turned out to work. It really turned out well for us because it was scientifically that important. Because there's very few of those out there. So you really don't know. And sometimes till you're done in the lab, what you may end up with. And there's a lot more goes into it than some people would. And you're really, really nice. Anyone else? A guy from South Dakota down here, I can't think of his name, but it'll come to me. James is his name. He came up to the ranch I was just working as a cowboy on, and he asked the landowner if he could go look around for dinosaurs. What's this crazy bugger doing? Literally, I wasn't on my radar. I wasn't a dinosaur fan as a kid. They hadn't really crossed my radar at all. I guess I knew people had found dinosaurs in our county, but it wasn't a big thing in our country. It is now. So he asked him, and he went out and looked, and he came back. He spent all weekend camping and whatnot. And he came back and he had this piece of Triceratops frill. And it was right after the movie Jurassic Park came out, so dinosaur craze was high. in the 90s there, and he said, yeah, I think I could probably sell this piece for probably $500. Wait a minute, you went for a hike, and you come back and you're gonna go sell this chunk of rock for $500. I bet I could find one. And so I just started looking. You know, so every free minute I had, I just went out and started. And now I got a disease I can't get rid of. That's all I want to do is go find something else. So yeah, that's kind of the story on how I got started. And I was blessed with the Stygia Moloch. When we sold that one, he gave me a year's wages to see if I could do it. And so it gave me a chance to. Here we go. And then we were blessed with this one, which I couldn't make this story up. Very blessed. Anybody else? Oh gosh, I don't know. That's a good question. If you count skeletons, not a lot. If you count individual pieces, a lot. I used to tell people I've walked by truckloads of dinosaur chunks, literally truckloads. If you go out prospecting, it's not hard to find a chunk of bone. It's hard to find a good bone, even half a good bone, like I was saying. But now I tell people I've probably walked by train car bones or fossils, dinosaur chunks. Yeah. And it's frustrating me. I'm going to go into this, I shouldn't, politically. But I'm on the board of a local museum, and I have a chunkosaur pile from my years of prospecting. I used to actually sell it by the bag. Whatever I could fit in my backpack, I'd usually make $2 a pound on it, and I could fit 20 pounds in my backpack. $40 paid the gas for it. It was worth picking those chunks up. I had a guy that was building dinosaurs, making models of it, and he'd go around in Pennsylvania and do talks to kids and give them pieces of the chunks that he'd got from me, whatever. It's cool. And so anyway, nobody's going to ever put an acquisition number on these chunks. No museums don't even collect them. They don't collect the chunks. They don't collect half a bone. Watch them walk by them. So me, I have this chunkosaur pile in my house. It's this tall, and it's $3. And I would love to donate those chunkosaurs to our local museum. We're trying to raise money for a new building there. And I would donate every bit of my chunkosaur if we could sell them through the museum. And people, I'm sure, would buy a piece of chunkosaur that I found, you know, and be happy to go home with it. And they stop visiting the museum and help us build a new one. Because we're on the Montana Dinosaur Trail, and SUP's rules, which they follow, they tell us they'll kick our museum off the dinosaur trail if I sell these fossils. So it's a political frustration. it's ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. I guarantee you if I donated that pile, they wouldn't take it. They wouldn't take it. Nobody's going to put an acquisition number and try to do a study on it and write a paper on a chunkosaur. They don't do that. So why can't I share it with you guys? It's frustrating. But at any rate, I'm done with politics. I don't like to argue. Any other questions?